I actually remembered this week about a party that I almost attended about 45 years ago. It's a long time to remember a party that you almost attended. It was an interesting night. It was an interesting time in my life, to be honest with you. It started with the death of a friend during midterms, my first year of university, which kind of set me on the wrong path to begin with. And then in December, my roommate got kidnapped. And then I had a gun held on me in my apartment. That all happened in December. And then January, I got, this situation with this party. So there were 6 of us, I remember. We were going to go to this party. We had a couple of problems with the party. The first one was that we weren't invited to it. So the idea was we were going to crash the party. And the theory was that once we got to the party and crashed the party and got inside, nobody would know whether we were invited or not. So that was kind of the theory we were working under. Problem number 2 was that I didn't want to go. I have to admit that I'm not much of a party guy to start off with, and this just did not sound like fun to me. I mean, being in a room full of people that you don't know, to an introvert, just does not sound very enticing. And I don't know whether you realize this, but there are introverts and there are extroverts. And the best way to decide which you are is actually how you recharge. I'm an introvert, which means that I recharge by being by myself, reading a book, listening to some music. This is the stuff that makes me recharge and rest and get me ready for the next day. If you're an extrovert, you're actually recharged by the party. You like to go where there's lots of people and lots of action, and that's how you recharge for the next day. And this has been something I don't think we talk enough about, especially when I should probably talk more about it in premarital courses, because this is a stress in some marriages. If one of the partners is an extrovert and they get recharged by the party, and the other one's an introvert that gets recharged by reading a book, sitting inside of a fire at home, we've got a problem. And we need to understand that. Doesn't mean they can't have a good marriage, but there's got to be give and take on the part of both spouses. So I'm an introvert. This party just didn't make any sense to me, but we decided to go. There were 6 of us, 3 guys, 3 girls. Basically, we were all appropriately paired up. And so we headed to where this party was. So the 6 of us got out of the car. I can't remember who was driving. I didn't have a car at the time. So we got out of the car and we went and tried to get into crash this party. And we couldn't get in. The door was locked. And there was lots of noise and sound and everything coming from the party. But we couldn't get anybody's attention to let us in. So here we are standing outside at this party, and we can't get inside unless we're going to break a window or something. And nobody suggested that at the time. And so we stood there banging and knocking and trying to get the attention of somebody to let us in, but nobody was listening to us. So we stayed on the outside. We finally decided that this was not going to happen. We were not going to get into the party. And for some reason, that was my fault, because I didn't want to be there in the first place. So they kind of all blamed me. And what ended up happening is 5 of my friends went off to do something, whatever they were going to do that night. And I wandered over to another friend's house where we spent the evening listening to music and having a quiet, intimate conversation. But that was the party. In some ways, we are often a culture in search of a party. So we're going to look at one verse this morning, and we've actually looked at the verse following it a couple of weeks ago. So now we're going to shift gears, and I want to look at one verse, which is the verse in front of it. And last week we spoke from Isaiah 40, and I mentioned that Isaiah 40 was written after the fall of Jerusalem, during what we would say was the Babylonian exile. The passage we're going to read this morning was written about 200 years earlier by the prophet Isaiah. And he was writing it to King Ahaz. And King Ahaz was an evil king sandwiched between two good kings. And that has always mystified me. Jotham, his dad, was a good king. But Ahaz was not. And part of the struggle, or part of the problem, I think, is that King Ahaz lived in a very stressful time, and he really had made the decision not to trust God. And so this just made him to make wrong decisions. And Isaiah the prophet was there with him, and he was trying to help him out as best he could, but Ahaz just simply wasn't listening. The big bad boy on the block was Assyria, and Assyria was starting to conquer all of the nations around it. It hadn't gotten to Israel yet. As this was written, Israel was still a country, but it wouldn't be for long. Judah was still there, and it would be until the Babylonians, 150 years later. So this is kind of the political situation. Ahaz is in trouble. He knows that the Assyrians are coming at some point, and I think all of this has played heavily on his psyche. And as he is struggling with all of this, Isaiah comes, and Isaiah writes this: "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace." And I want to just take that one verse, and we're going to take it kind of a phrase at a time. So we'll start off with, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given." And if you're trying to fill in the blank, that first blank is, it's time for a party. Like I said, we are a culture that is in search of a party. And having a child born is a good excuse for a party, right? So a couple weeks ago, in our sister service, the Elevated Life Church, Eric and Muriel, Eric sometimes plays bass for us up here, they had a baby shower for young Erica. I don't know what she hasn't been born yet, so I have no idea what her name is. I'm calling her Erica for now, and they're just kind of rolling their eyes and kind of saying, just ignore him. So she hasn't been born yet, but they had a baby shower for her party a couple weeks ago, and we have these things. We have baby showers, we have gender reveals. That was not a thing when my kids were born. In fact, to be blunt, when my kids were born, I didn't know either of their genders until after they were born. We could have known. We just decided we didn't want to know. And people look at us and go, well, how do you buy the right clothes and the right decorations for their room? And we just thought we'd have time to do it after they were born, and we found out whether it was a boy or a girl. But we have gender reveal parties. There's always a reason for a party. Today is Gaudete Sunday. I'm sure that you're all well aware of what that means, and that you have, dressed appropriately. I'll actually explain what it means in just a second, but really to get to what Gaudete Sunday is, which is today, I have to get to a couple of other things to try to explain it. So we are in the season of Advent. You're all with me so far? We're in the season of Advent. Advent has a nickname. Advent is often called Little Lent. And to be honest with you, I didn't know why. So I did what every pastor does when he doesn't know something. I asked my computer why it was called Little Lent. And so I just typed in that question. Why is it called Little Lent? And this is what my computer told me. So if you don't like it, this is what my computer says. Advent is often called Little Lent because it has a penitential character similar to Lent and is shorter in duration. Now, I would have said probably grammatically that should be but is shorter in, but my computer isn't that great at grammar, so it said and is shorter in duration. So that is what Advent, that's why Advent is called Little Lent. Bet you didn't even know that this time was supposed to be a time of penitence, of making sure that we're getting ourselves ready for the birth of the Christ child. So first thing you need to understand is Advent is called Little Lent, and in Lent, in Big Lent, we have a Sunday that is called Laeter Sunday. Now, I've probably never told you that. This coming year, 2025, Laeter Sunday will follow on March 30th. Just, file that somewhere so you know. When we get to March 30th, that's Laeter Sunday. Laeter Sunday is a Sunday that we Laeter. In Latin, Laeter has a meaning. In Latin, Laeter means rejoice. So, Laeter Sunday, we rejoice. So why haven't you heard me talk about this more often? Well, to be honest with you, because I have a hard time talking about Lent to some of you. I mean, some of you, I say Lent, and it's a time of sacrifice. What are you going to give up for Lent? And you look at me like I'm coming from Mars or something. And of course you're not going to give up anything for Lent because that sounds stupid to you. What do you expect me to give up? And some of you give up like chocolate or something. That's fine. Great. Do it. Give up something. I used to say that, I would give up the speed limit for Lent. But that doesn't usually end up with me being too prosperous. But we give up something for Lent, and like I said, when I talk about this, one of the normal reactions I get is, go bury your head someplace. I'm not going to do that. And then the other side is that you go really hyper-focused on this. So one thing in Lent, which I have explained before, I know, is that you give up something for Lent, but you don't give it up on Sundays. Because Sundays are a day that is set aside for celebration. We celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, not just at Easter. We do this every Sunday when we gather together. Sunday is a day of celebration, celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, and you cannot fast on a day of celebration. So if you've given up chocolate for Lent and it's Sunday, you can eat as much chocolate as your doctor says is healthy. You don't have to give it up on Sunday. But the other reaction that I get, besides I'm not going to do it, is this. Some sort of rephrasing of, well, I'm a real Christian. I don't take Sundays off. If it's Lent, I will fast on Sundays as well, because I'm a real Christian. Right? So for all of you who feel that way, even if you're not really telling me that right now, Laeter Sunday is a problem for us. Because Laeter Sunday takes its name from the first word of the passage in Isaiah 66 that is read on that Sunday. Laeter means rejoice. And here's the passage that we would normally read on Laeter Sunday. Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her. All you who love her, rejoice greatly with her. All who mourn over her, for you will nurse and be satisfied at her comforting breasts. You will drink deeply and delight in her overflowing abundance. And then there's a psalm that goes with Laeter Sunday, and it says this: I rejoiced with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Here is the problem for all of us who are trying to celebrate Lent. That word laeter is an imperative. Do you know what an imperative is? It says do it. This is not an option. When we get to Laeter Sunday on March 30th and we're fasting because that's what we do, well, Psalm 66 says, rejoice anyway. Get a party going. This is a happy time. Rejoice, O church. God is doing something in your midst. And we go, well, no, but this is Lent, so we're not going to do that. And that's just, like I said, it's just too much to really talk about. So I just usually don't go close to Laeter Sunday. Maybe this year I will have to. Gaudete Sunday. Oh, by the way, one other thing you need to know, the liturgical color for Laeter Sunday is pink. There. Now, Gaudete Sunday takes its word from the first word of the Latin Bible verse that is to be read on this Sunday. Anybody have any idea what Gaudete means? Anybody? Gaudete means rejoice. It's just not the imperative, okay? The imperative is laeter. Gaudete is not. It just means simple rejoice. Here's the problem, though. It may not be the imperative, but the verse we get it from doesn't sound much like a suggestion. Here it is. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again. Rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Does that sound like it is an option to you? Rejoice in the Lord always. And then this is the psalm for today. You, Lord, showed favor to our land, and you restored the fortunes of Jacob. So we have this Gaudete Sunday, and Gaudete Sunday, which means rejoice, and it's the first day that we light the pink candle on the Advent wreath because it means joy, rejoice. This is what we are to do. We are to throw a party because a child is coming. Unto us a child is born, and to us a son is given. So get ready for the party. Today is Gaudete Sunday. We are to rejoice because the child is coming. It will be with us soon. And the government will be on his shoulders. So if you're, again, trying to do the blanks, it's a solution for the future. For the government will be on his shoulders. I saw a poll in the States, and apparently most Americans are really excited for the coming of Donald I. As he, prepares to do whatever he's going to be doing for the United States. It's good to know that, though Donald I is getting older, that Donald II is ready to go as well. So if something happens, we do have a succession, and we will continue our kings. Most people are in favor of Donald I. You probably heard it. It was probably over a week ago now that Donald I made a suggestion to Pierre Trudeau that he knows what the 51st state should be. Yeah, you heard about that? It's called Canada. It will be the 51st state. He was joking, but he keeps on joking about this. There's been a couple reactions to this. I was speaking with a friend, I guess, a week ago, and we were talking a little bit about this, and he said, well, no, people would step in for us if they ever tried to do that. And I wasn't so sure. But apparently, because Donald is still talking about this. He talked about it more this week. Apparently, the real problem with Canada being the 51st state is that we are farther left than the United States is. So if you go to our far right is left of their far right. And if you go to our far left is left of where their far left is. So we are just simply moved left, and that's not something King Donald really wants, so he won't touch us. There was a poll of Canadians wondering how they felt about this, and 11% of Canadians said it was a good idea. Don't think it's going to happen. But here's the problem. Donald has a reason for wanting to take Canada into his own pocket. The oil would really help him. It would help him keep costs down. It would help him to do things that he wants to do. The problem is what I just mentioned, that we're farther left. Bernie Sanders came up with this idea. He said, yeah, I support annexing Canada as long as they bring their health care with them, which we know that Trump doesn't want either. But the government will be on his shoulders. And here's the problem. When we look at this passage, we hear Isaiah talking about Jesus. I don't think Isaiah was talking about Jesus. I really don't think that was in the forefront of his mind. I don't think he was saying, today I'm going to write a prophecy. I'm going to write a prophecy of the Messiah, and I'm going to, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and that is going to be the Messiah. I don't think that was Isaiah's thought pattern. Isaiah was looking at a little 3 or 4 year old toddler that was in King Ahaz's palace. And he was saying, for unto us a child is given. For unto us a son. And the government will be on this toddler's shoulder. Ahaz, I know you're stressed out. I know you're afraid of what Assyria is going to do. But I'm here to tell you that God has already decided that you're not going to have to deal with Assyria. That little 3 or 4 year old, I know it's hard to imagine that right now, but that little boy that is running around your palace is the one that will have to deal with Assyria. The government will be on his shoulders. And Isaiah was right. When Ahaz passed away, his son, a guy named Hezekiah, became king. And while most people think that the best king that Israel ever had was David, there are a few of us who, for several reasons, think that the rest of you are all wet. That Hezekiah was the best king. Not that he didn't make mistakes, he made lots of them. But he ruled Judah at a time when everything around Judah could have come crashing down on them. In a few years, maybe, 30, 20, this toddler that Isaiah was watching in the palace was going to grow up and was going to stand on the wall of Jerusalem as Sennacherib had totally surrounded the city. The Assyrian army had decided that they were going to wait Jerusalem out. They had already destroyed the towns that were around them. The last thing they needed to do was get Jerusalem. And this little boy stood on the walls of that city and looked out at the Assyrian army just camping there, waiting for them to stop. He heard as Sennacherib and the generals came and said, "Hey, people of Jerusalem, I don't know what Hezekiah is trying to tell you, but let me tell you this. Hezekiah is lying to you. There is no way out of this. If you come now, you will live. But if you follow Hezekiah, you will die. So open up the gates and let us come in and do the right thing now, because Hezekiah doesn't know what he's doing. And Hezekiah, standing on the walls, prayed to God. And he tore his clothes in mourning. And he went to see God's representative, a man named Isaiah. And this is what happened. When King Hezekiah heard this, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth. And he went into the temple of the Lord. He sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna, the secretary, and the leading priests, all wearing sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah of Amos. They told him, "This is what Hezekiah says. This day is a day of distress and rebuke and disgrace, as when children come to the moment of birth, and there is no strength to deliver them." When King Hezekiah's officials came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, "Tell your master, this is what the Lord says. Do not be afraid of what you have heard." Those words with which the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Isaiah comes to the advisors of Hezekiah and says, "Go back and tell Hezekiah that he's doing the right thing. He doesn't have to worry about the army that is camped around us. I will take care of them. Keep your trust in me." I don't know about you, but sometimes I can feel like Hezekiah on the wall. Everything seems to be coming against me. There's no escape. Life is overwhelming. And sometimes I think we need to hear the words of Isaiah. Just keep trusting. You're where I want you to be. This will not overcome you. We are watching Christmas movies with a couple of my grandchildren. We watched one last night, and one phrase stuck out. It said, "Just because it's God's plan doesn't mean it's going to be easy." Yeah. Just because it's God's plan does not mean it's going to be easy. But I've got you. Stand in my strength. Ahaz never learned how to do it, but Hezekiah did. Because of that, Jerusalem would stand. The government would be on his shoulders. It is also a prophecy of what is coming, when Jesus will stand on the earth and the government will be on his shoulders. There will be a different way of doing things. The kingdom that we know now will pass away, and there will be a different way, a more loving way, a more righteous way of doing things when that day comes. But for now, stand firm and trust God. The rest of the verse. "And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace." And again, if you're trying to keep notes, it's "Here comes the Son. For to us a child is born. Here comes the Son." Yeah, you want to sing? Go ahead. It was 1968, and a guy you might know, maybe not. George Harrison, he's famous for something. George Harrison was working with the Beatles, and he said that working with the Beatles had become almost more of a 9-to-5 job. It was meeting with music executives and record executives and all these people, and less about the music that had attracted him in the first place. He said it was the end of an English winter, and according to George Harrison, the end of an English winter can take forever to pass. I kind of feel that way with an Edmonton winter too. It seems like it just never wants to go away. And so this English winter was there, and he was tired and he was burned out, and he didn't want to work with any more accountants. And so one day he just told his bandmates that he was going to go over and visit the house of Eric Clapton. Grabbed his guitar and went over to Eric's house. And as he walked around Eric's house, he said the sun came out. And it felt like a nice spring day, like the end of the English winter might be just around the corner. And so George says, I was walking around Eric Clapton's house with my acoustic guitar, and I just started to play some chords. And as I played the chords, I started to sing. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun. And I say, it's all right. Yeah. Here comes the sun. I think we get this verse a little wrong. I think the NIV actually has it a little wrong. I think they're missing a comma in it. I think it should be, and he will be called Wonderful. Not Wonderful Counselor, but just Wonderful. And he will be called Counselor. And he will be called Mighty God. And he will be called Everlasting Father. And he will be called Prince of Peace. He will be called Wonderful. Jesus came and he was wonderful. He was wonderful in his pre-existence. He was wonderful in his ministry. He was wonderful in his miracles. He was wonderful as he stands today in intercession for us. In every way that Jesus was, he was wonderful. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. For today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." And when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." Can you think of anything that is more wonderful than that? He will be called Counselor. He will be the one who will give us the words of life. He will help us to live on this plane with his assistance, with his help. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. I can leave you my counsel because my words will always be there. He'll be called Mighty God. Oh, sometimes we struggle with this. I often say we would almost rather, I think, serve Hercules. See, Hercules was half God, half man. And we want Jesus to be the same, but he's not. He's fully God. and he's fully man. And I know the math doesn't work, but it's okay with God that the math fails. He's 100% God, and he's 100% man. He is fully God. And we get this idea from the beginning of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was Jesus. And Jesus was with God. And Jesus was God. And he was with God in the beginning. Through him all things are made. And without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life. And that life was the light of all mankind. The light that shines in the darkness. And the darkness has not and will not overcome it. He is mighty God. He is everlasting Father. There's a bit of a riddle here. How could a baby born in a manger be the everlasting Father? And that was actually a riddle that the Pharisees picked up on. You are not yet 50 years old, they said to him. And you have seen Abraham? Very well, I tell you, Jesus answered. Before Abraham was born, I am. Now, again, I recognize grammatically that's not right. But Jesus wasn't talking about grammar. Okay, now I lost the verse. Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. What he was saying was, I am that I am. The name that Moses received from God at the burning bush. Before Abraham was born, before Moses was born, before Moses learned from God that that was the name of God, before all of this, Jesus says, I am. At this, they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. Hebrews says this, we need to keep our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. He is Jesus, but he is also the everlasting Father. And Isaiah said that that would be true. Last one. He is Prince of Peace. He is not the way to peace. We need to understand this, because sometimes I think that's what we think, that Jesus is the way to peace. He's not. He is peace. Without him, there is no peace. He is peace. Probably the worst event in the history of the 20th century was not the two huge wars that were fought. It was something that happened at the midway point between those wars. At the midway point between those wars, there was a stock market crash, and there was a depression, and a lot of rich people lost a lot of what they had. And they were sad, and they were without peace because they were focusing on money. They were focusing on companies to give them peace, and those things were gone. And without them, they could not find peace. But Jesus has never told us that we will find our peace in money, or that we will find our peace in friends, or that we will find our peace in companies. He said, you will find your peace in me. And if you keep your eyes focused on me, you will have peace. I have to admit that Christmas is a bit of a hard time for me. I tend to get lost in thought about all the people that will not be sharing Christmas with me. My grandparents. I had a grandpa who was an amateur, camera person, photographer. Loved to take moving pictures on Christmas morning. You'd have to wait for him before you could go into the living room where the Christmas tree was, because he'd be setting up all of his lights. He had that light bar that he used to hold up so everything was well illuminated and everybody was blind after he shut it off. And he'd have that movie picture and he'd start taking these pictures. I miss my grandfather. I miss my grandmother. This woman who, when I was a teenager, could stay up with me after midnight and still be the first one up in the morning to make breakfast for those who went to bed at a good time. I miss my grandmother. Miss my other grandparents. Grandpa Baker was a great storyteller. I miss sitting on Christmas Day and just listening to the stories that he would tell. Or the gentleness of Grandma Baker, who was a great Scrabble player. I love to spend time just playing games with her. Not going to see my mom this Christmas. She struggles in a home. If it was up to all of that, there would be no peace. But I have decided that I want to keep my eyes somewhere else. I want to keep them on Jesus. I want my peace to come from that. Suddenly a great company of heavenly hosts appeared with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to those on whom his favor rests." I've heard the angel chorus, and that's what I have focused my attention on. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given. I've heard the angels. I've decided that I will listen to them, and I will hear them, and I will experience their peace. And so, on Gaudette Sunday, welcome to the party. Messiah is coming. A child will be born. And the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be Wonderful Counselor. He will be Everlasting Father, Mighty God. He will be Prince of Peace. And the path might not be easy. But he is still with us. And he will walk it with us. And he will give us the strength that we need for whatever it is that's coming. So we might as well celebrate. Get ready for the party. Let me pray. Father, thank you for this season, for a reason to celebrate and rejoice. Thank you for all of the ways that you come to us and speak to us and carry us and strengthen us. Thank you that the time is coming when we will see you, not as a baby in the manger, but as the returning King. But until that time comes, remind us that in your kingdom there are times set apart for the party, and get us ready for it. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Emmanuel, Emmanuel.